Thank you once again, MBILF, for having us here and for this awesome festival. And it's so awesome to be sharing stage with these fantastic authors with me. And today they are here to regale you and to also take you through their own journeys as writers. So, people write for various reasons. And, sometimes the reason you're writing for is either there or not there. Katerina, would you like to take us through to that poem of yours, which elucidates this?
Η Αλεπού. Μέσα στη δέσμη του φωτός εμφανίστηκε. Διέσχισε το δρόμο. Μια μικρή καφέ Αλεπού. Και ξανά το επόμενο βράδυ, πίσω από ένα θάμνο φευγαλέα, και μια άλλη φορά η ουρά της μόνο σκούπισε το σκοτάδι. Και από τότε πάλι τις πατούσες της να βηματίζουν στο βλέμμα σου. Το ζεστό γούνινο σώμα της ανάμεσά μας να σκυρτά. Πάντα σε πέρασμα, ποτέ σε στάση. «Μα ποια είσαι?» τη ρωτήσαμε. «Είμαι», είπε, «αυτό που περισσεύει». The fox. In the sheath of light she appeared, crossed the road, a small brown fox. And again the next evening, behind a bush fleetingly, and another time only her tail swept the darkness, and from then on, her paws walking inside your eyes, her warm furry body quivering between us. Always passing, never stationary. "But who are you?" we asked. "I am," she said, "what is always in excess."
Love. So Katerina has written about this fox, which is very evasive. So could you tell us about, this inspiration or the reason that you write this, about something as evasive as the fox?
I think that maybe the fox represents what is in the core of poetry and art, which is the thing that you cannot possess. So I don't have to say any more about that. But my starting point, I think that is based in three words, which are also actions. First action is to connect. So I think that what we call inspiration is something that tries to talk to you. And what you do as a poet is you try to translate this conversation into poetry. And the second word is understand. I write because I want to understand. And, the philosopher Baruch Spinoza said that love is a form of understanding, or that understanding is love. And the third thing is, I would say, knowledge. So I write because I want to understand, and by writing, I learn things. I learn about this word. So connecting, understanding, and learning, or knowing something that was not there before, knowing what I don't know, because when you write, you don't go towards what you know, you go towards what you don't know. And by this process, you teach yourself things that were not there before. So I want to point out that this work has to do with loving this world, understanding this world. Yeah.
That's so lovely. At the core of all writing, I think it takes a lot of understanding on the part of the author. So Aneeta, you've traversed many lives, as a lawyer, as a baby storyteller who told stories about everything under the sun, and then as a writer, who writes short stories and novels. So could you tell us a bit about what inspires you to write and what brought you here to this platform?
Okay. When I thought about what you said, I needed to compose my thoughts. Now, as lawyers, okay, I trained and practiced as a lawyer. So the reputation of lawyers isn't great the world over. And I think that what I found was that when I started writing, it was a search for the truth. It sounds, cliche, my truth and the truth. But in other words, in quite simply, I tried to bring to you my story of my people, my world, because it's such a small area that most people don't know. Malaysia, yes, I come from Malaysia, but a lot of the contemporary writers write about Kuala Lumpur, Penang, Malacca. They are the usual places that most people visit. But I come from a very small town called Alasta, which is an hour south of Thailand. So my focus was to bring to the readers my world as best as I could. And I will give you a simple example. When I started my novel, it was the first novel, The Age of Smiling Secrets. It was set in Foothills Estate, which is in Kulim. My father was born and brought up in Foothills Estate. And at the time, there were all sorts of stories, especially in the Commonwealth. They sent out a call for submissions for children of indenture, legacy of indenture. And the stories that they got were all very sad, because a lot of abuse was going on. So I wrote to the Commonwealth Writers Foundation, and I said, would you like a story about, from a granddaughter's perspective, of a man who came and worked in the estates, but his life wasn't bad. And I will tell you that my father told me to my face when I wrote the novel, Foothills is a lovely place, don't make it sound bad. So I kept that in mind, and that's how I wrote the novel. The idea was to make you realize that not all life was so bad or so good. It's just that, so the search for truth, I went into myself, my family, and crafted my stories from there.
Lovely. So could you read a little bit about, from your book on the search for truth? You had a little passage.
A very short passage, but I need to give you a bit of background, which is quick. Because, as I said, he was born and brought up in Foothills Estate. And he used to tell me stories. Daddy used to tell me stories. And it was quite interesting because there was a temple, a small temple. And in there, they had this Kumbhavishegam ceremony. So, and one day he said that when they did it, they took the idol off the thing and there was a snake inside, cobra. And nobody knows how he got that cobra was in there. And then another time, another guy, he 3 months after they robbed the place, he was blind. So I thought, that's quite a good story. So in the novel, I write about Nagakanna because I fuse them together, Nagakanna. And he features very much in Foothills Estate. And he talks to the snakes. There are snakes featured, Year of the Snake. So it's a very short passage. And this is the conversation with the two snakes. Well, what do you think? Will this all work out? Nagakanna asked the agitated king cobra, waiting for his queen, the one he'd left to guard their eggs. There was no reply. Hey, Nagakanna shouted, where do you all think you're going? The king cobra had gone for a slither about. Rather than a walkabout, he'd gone for a slither about.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. She is talking the truth, but she is making the snakes talk, all right. So that is, the leeway that fiction authors get.
A lot of leeway.
A lot of leeway. Yeah. And Claire too. She's a bit of a dreamer, much of a dreamer, who's been dreaming all her life and then escapes into her own world to delve into that and come out and tell her own story. So could you take us back to your early years, and to why you started writing, and your little diaries and all of that? Yeah.
Thank you, Nirmala, for that. And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for coming to this very late session. I'm so happy to see you all. And I don't think I can talk about wanting to write, why I write, without going back to my childhood. If you were in my earlier session, I spoke about my childhood. And I grew up as an almost like an only child, and that is very lonely. I envy other people who have sisters, who have siblings, because I grew up alone. And because I grew up alone, the books became my friends. And books healed me. I mean, they brought me to, reading books brought me to different worlds. They made me feel new emotions. They allowed me to meet new people, new characters. And so I read a lot. Aside from being with my parents, I read a lot. And eventually, I also wanted to write one because books changed my life. Honestly, it's so simple. Now I want to change others' lives with my books, with my writing. And they really have moved me. Words move me, characters move me, the actions of characters touch me, and they make me do different things afterwards. And to give you a bit of a background, I wrote in journals as well. I've been writing in diaries and journals since I was small. And until now, first thing I do when I wake up is to write in my journal. It's just part of me. And if I don't even write a line, I feel kind of off during the day. But then I became a journalist. I became a magazine editor. So I had to write feature articles. That is to pay for my bills. But I still dream of writing books, and I've written some novels. And I would like to share with you my latest novel, which is Way City. And would you like me to read, Nirmala?
Yeah, if you'd like to read, but before you read
Oh,
from
I have.
We City,
Yes.
can we get some insights
yes,
from
of
your
course.
little diary which is tucked away?
Oh.
And those little inspirations. Would you like to read something
Yeah, I
from
couldn't
there?
find. I'm
Yeah?
so sorry, I couldn't
Yeah.
find a thing.
You couldn't find.
Yeah.
Okay, then we do the We City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We come back to I thought we'd come back to the We City, but read on. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Read it.
All right. Okay, so this is my latest novel. I've written romances in the past, 5 romances. But what I really wanted to do was write a piece of literary fiction. Because I'm that. I'm tired of being lighthearted or doing a formula, but it was a good run, and now it's time for me to. I really felt that this story was spilling out of me. In fact, the book, I wrote it in 5 years, on and off. I really wanted to give up many times, but it just wanted to come out. And so here we are. This is a Southeast Asian story, very character driven, and it's about 3 characters who want to start over. This is the whole theme of the book. They want to begin again. They're desperate for a second chance. So I actually have a character who is a Filipina, and she's part of a gang in Manila, but she wants to change her life. I also have a Vietnamese character who's a pimp and a tout and a hotel receptionist. But he wants more. He wants more out of life. And I have a Singaporean who seems to have everything but is looking for connection. So I have all these characters, and I'm going to read from this character called Marina. And she seems to have everything, successful in life, in career, but she's so desperate to have someone in her life. And this is how she acts out. Okay. The chapter is called Accomplice. Super short, okay? Everyone wants a lover, but what they really need is an accomplice. Someone who thinks you're not crazy for doing something random, like standing in front of a closed museum in the dark, waiting for a stranger you've just met, waiting for him to pick you up, to bring you to a hotel where, as he promised, you would learn the language of the Vietnamese. Someone like Vin, maybe, who'd come up with a silly secret code for sex. For what else was there to do inside the hotel room? It was Marina who told him earlier that evening about wanting to learn Vietnamese. But it was he who instructed her to take a taxi from her 5-star resort, travel the 40-minute distance, and a light in front of Hui's Royal Museum of Antiquities along Lechuk. Wait for him, he'd said, and he would come. She stood under a busted street lamp, hidden in the shadows, despite which she felt exposed, vulnerable, a little unsure. It was already 10 o'clock, and the streets in this part of Hue City were deserted, and she was supposed to be somewhere else or in bed because God knows how her 40-year-old body needed that sleep. But never mind all that. Never mind that she had only met Vin that very day. She had said yes because she had been looking for an accomplice all her life. Thank you.
So, actually who you are. We were also discussing what we are in our present lives or in our past lives actually inspires us to write what we write and the kind of things that we write about. Of course, your life as a journalist, as somebody who's been in the here and there, reporting different things, has actually brought you to write a lot of romantic novels, and then now you have Hue City, which is a literary fiction novel, but again, based on real characters. So, going on to Katerina, could you talk about the characters? Of course, you're seeking truth while writing, but what are your real inspirations? Because you're a jewelry designer, right? And how do the two lives kind of intersect in terms of your creative expression as a designer, as a writer? What are your inspirations?
Well, before I studied jewelry design and making, I studied chemistry, and I think that these things have nothing to do with each other, but I think lately I have realized that what connects everything is my deep love for material world, for matter, for things in this world, be it stones and sand and soil, plants and animals, and so what is there? How do these things connect with each other? So it's a deep love for matter, I think. That's what I can say. But generally, I have realized, and this is not something that you choose, but it's something that chooses you. So you cannot choose your inspiration. And we don't work, usually, you don't work with themes. You work with things that you need to explore, to research. So for me, for some reason, the core theme in my writing, in many different ways, is place. And it is our relationship with place. I'm talking about my poetry now. And I tend to write books that are compositions. They are not collections of individual poems. So every time is a different kind of construction. I work with structure a lot. So I see my books as sort of as if they exist inside space as well as installations in a way, and they have each book has its own architecture and it has its own points of connection and repetition, and so in a way a lot of times is like I'm trying to read the world and the things that constitutes it as if it were a book, and then my book is a kind of landscape that one can maybe walk through and experience it with more senses than reading, experience it with their whole body. I mean, that's what I would like and I aspire to.
That's lovely, actually. That sounds really artistic, like, a good confluence of art and science, which is melding to kind of create this
Yes,
picture.
because if I could add something, especially about poetry, because poetry has a kind of mystery, but poetry is an art on its own, and it has its own materials, it has its own rules, it has its own criteria. And when we work as poets, we don't expect our inspiration to come from somewhere, from elsewhere, you know. It's work, and it needs to it needs to create a kind of research, a field of research every time that is poetic research, but nevertheless, it can have elements from science or philosophy or other fields. And you create your own workshop. Maybe the workshop is not so visual as a jewelry workshop when you have your tools and your materials and everything, but nevertheless it is a workshop that you have to go back and create this thing, because when you write, and I'm sure Claire and Aneeta also know that, you it's like you create the road where you step. With your works, you create more space. That's why writing is expansion, literally expansion. So this space has to be created by you in order to step inside it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving from the jewelry space, where jewelry is created, to the courtroom, which has been Aneeta's space of inhabitation for many, many years. And from there, I think you moved on to write your short stories, which are inspired by psychological themes. So could you kind of relate the two and sort of take us there? Yeah.
Katerina started it because she started with, I'd like to follow through with what she said. The story chooses you. When I first started the novel, it is, in one sentence, it's about a family that is torn apart because the husband converts to Islam, and without the knowledge of the wife, converts their child as well. And where I come from, Malaysia, Sharia and the civil system are concurrent jurisdictions. So that causes a lot of confusion. So when I started the novel, I didn't choose to write, it happened. And I thought, this is a story that I'd like to tell. And I had a lot of issues with the agent because she wanted me to change the nexus of the crux of the story and make it a courtroom drama. I said, that doesn't work because... so that's where my years in practice worked, because I could say to her, if I write what you ask me to, number one, I'm not being true. Number two, my friends will laugh at me. So that for me, when you ask me, the connection, that was what it was. So the story chose me, and I started writing, and that's the novel. That is The Age of Smiling Secrets. But in this short story collection, I have a story on the same basis, but I extended it to the metaverse. So, in that story, the father uses the metaverse, and in the end, there is no necessity and no need for a mother, because the child grows up wondering, what's a mother? I mean, it's a little bit like Brave New World, or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, but it was a frightening story as to what, that was, the one story. Other than that, courtroom scenes, I do use the knowledge that I have, but my writing is not legal based, which is another point that I made to the editor. I'm not writing about the law. You can go and Google it. That's really not a big deal. I wasn't interested. What I was fascinated by was, what does a mother go through? The law, the judge said, custody must go equal custody, but the child should stay with the mother, but the mother must not influence a child. How does a Hindu mother not influence a Muslim child? The child is, in my story, the child was no more than 10. When you go to sleep at night, what stories is she supposed to read the child to bed? So how do you not influence?
Yeah, so no. What I was asking you was, how was your time in the courtroom inspired you to be a writer in creating your work? And that's what we were kind of discussing. But going from there to, characters and the people that inspire you, either in terms of, I think Claire, could talk about this, about the characters because that have inspired you in your works. Like it could be real people, it could be people that you met in your dreams, it could be people that you wrote about earlier, So could you take us there?
It's about family.
Family, that's what, So we'll come back. Maybe we could start with Claire and yeah.
Thank you, Nirmala. Yeah, whenever people read Huey City, they always say, oh, it's a character study. Because I really start with character. Well, what really inspires me are stories of people. And they can be uncomfortable, they can be different, strange, they can be positive, negative, but these are all stories of people. And a lot of them are actually overlooked. And so sometimes I really try to get a very, very tiny, tiny story, a tiny moment, and that can be even like a chapter in your book. That could be the whole premise of your novel. And I really don't know, but I created 3 characters. My novel, Huey City, is actually multi-POV. So each chapter is the voice of a different character. So I have 3 characters. One, it's based in, it's set in Southeast Asia, in Manila, in Singapore, and in Vietnam. And what else was that? what were you asking to?
Yeah. No, you were also telling me a little earlier about the characters that are there. You sometimes make little notes in your diary.
Yeah.
You could find your character in the
Yes,
diary, or you could have found them while interviewing somebody because you're a journalist. So they find resonance with some of the people
Definitely.
that you've met either in your dreams or in reality.
Definitely. Because I've interviewed so many people in my career. I've met all sorts. And on top of that, I have friends, I have families, and they all tell me their stories. And I'm really a listener, actually. I talk now, overly talk, but I'm known as a listener. And so I hear all these stories. In fact, my first novel was called No Boyfriend Since Birth. And that is not my story, okay? It's the story of my friends who I kept hearing about not having a boyfriend, and they've never had a boyfriend. And so the term came up, no boyfriend since birth. And that was really that resonated with a lot of Filipinos. And when you were talking to me about the diaries, yes, I write a lot in my journal. I just write, and then ideas come. And my technique for that is I just underline things that come. And it's not magical. It's not magical that way. It's just there, or there is a pattern that comes up. And so I really use a very simple system. I just underline what I feel I could use in my novel.
Lovely. And you wanted to add something, Aneeta?
It's, characters don't necessarily have to be human. I have a book called Laddu Dog because I had a Dachshund and the entire book is about her and her name is Laddu. So, it is, to add to that, where you ask me about inspiration, I just watched the dog and, I found, and that book sold out very fast, surprisingly fast, because I didn't realize that so many people like stories about dogs by a dog, literally.
That's very cute. Yeah. So Katerina has wrote about a fox. And of course several other poems. But you've also worked on the novel, right? So could you tell us a bit about the difference in the process, of how you approach the novel versus the poem?
Yeah, yes, I have. My first novel is about to be published. It was a different. I have written prose before, but it was short form, like short stories. And so it is a different kind of adventure because with a novel you stay for a longer time and you stay with the characters for a longer time. So you don't feel so lonely as you feel when you are writing poetry. These characters are with you, but they kind of haunt you as well. I would say that, very shortly, the theme of my novel is displacement and rootlessness. And in various ways, the characters of the novel, which are, each one is a separate chapter, they experience this lack of roots or the loss of their roots, of their home. So the core question is, where am I? And where do I belong? It's heavy, but I wanted them to have an exodus towards light. So I think that the novel is heavy because the themes are very heavy, and it's not only literally loss of roots and home, but also metaphorically, existentially. In each one of each one's life, we have experienced, or we will experience, periods where we think that we have lost the sense of belonging. So this is something common. In many ways, it unites us. And also the character, like the main character of the book, is also the writer of the book. So the whole book is also a comment about writing as belonging. And about giving value to what Claire was saying before. If everyone is a carrier of a story, each person is unique and valuable. So each one is worth listening to. So, yeah.
That's lovely, especially given, the current situation in Europe with the number of immigrants that are coming and going, So in that context, I'd like to know from each one of you, because you come from different countries, how much of the political is in the personal in the stories that you'll tell? Maybe you could take us through that, and then is in the personal, because they're personal stories, but how much of the political milieu is also kind of transposed into the personal element, because it does tend to become the voice of where we come from, either by chance, by a deliberate attempt, or by chance. It just happens.
It is inevitable, I think. Again, in my case, not intentional, but I want to say that my generation, in the West, we lived through some decades, the 80s and the 90s, that were, we were very privileged in having peace, in having a, and quite good way of life, And then the economic crisis of 2008 came in the whole of Europe, but Greece was affected very, very much, very severely. And then I think that my generation realized that we are subjects of history, that we cannot escape history, and that is this surge, this wave of history really swept us off our feet. And then we realized that during the 90s that Europe was like partying and living this quite privileged life. In Eastern Europe, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, people were suffering, and of course in other parts of the world. So it makes you, it really shakes you when we experience these kind of things. And also the past comes, because in Greece we have dictatorship, we had I began to see the past coming to the present and merge in a very strange way. And also what you say about the immigration and refugee crisis, that the countries of Southern Europe suffer much more because of the hypocrisy of the politics of the European Union. I have to say that they have created this refugee crisis. It wouldn't be a crisis. They have created this narrative about refugee crisis, and they have pushed more and more people to the far right, although these refugee people could be divided equally in all countries, and there would not be a problem. I had to say that. It has nothing to do with my writing, but I had to say that. So by experiencing all this, it comes into your life, it comes into your writing in different ways.
In my case, in one of the stories, one of the most popular stories in the collection is a story called Say Hello to Yama. And what happened was, it came about because at the back of my house, there is a monsoon drain. And it was filling up because there is indiscriminate development. So the politics of the land is that, we can't control it. They're just building and building and building. So one day I happened to say to my mother, this is ridiculous. One day we are all the house is just going to sink and we're all just going to say, hello, Yama. So I thought that's a good title. Then what my story is about a landslide that happened. And that I thought about this, Say Hello to Yama, in November 2022. In December, there was a very bad landslide. Again, indiscriminate development. They had cleared the land, and 31 people died. So I used that part of it to create this story about a lady who runs away from she and her husband have to run because the husband is being chased by a loan shark, and they stay in this kampong village, and the village is taken over by the politicians, and there's so much underhand things going on, nobody really knows. And then they stay in a hut, and the hut is occupied by the Rohingya, so the refugees who come. And then the story ends with a whole drama of her and the husband running away and leaving her alone. So that is the one story, I think, in this entire collection that fuses all this, what you've asked, whether the politics comes into the personal, very much so. And, and I used a quote by a psychiatrist about living in conditions like this, because it's not easy. You take people out of their house and they have to go and stay with people who are strangers, and it's really quite depressing, actually. So
I don't think my story is political at all, but in Hue City, it really shows that great class divide, between that big gap between rich and poor. For example, in the Philippines, like one of my main characters, her name is Carmen. She's a Filipina, and she's part of this gang in the Philippines. Very, very low group of scammers called the Ativan gang. And Ativan is like a drug that you give for surgery and for some other things, and it knocks you out for like 36 hours. So this woman, she's actually looking for her mother, and she's poor. She's not well off. She's unemployed. She didn't finish her education, and she somehow found this gang. Now, this Ativan gang, they are actually a group of men and women who pose as a family, and they approach solo tourists. This is a real gang in the Philippines, and they were very big in the 80s, 90s. Now, there's still some, but I did my deep research, I interviewed, and I read all the news clippings also about it. And they pose as a family, and they approach solo tourists, and they say, come, let's go, let's have karaoke, let's enjoy karaoke. Let's eat authentic Filipino food. And so this tourist comes with them. They sing and drink and eat, and they somehow slip in the drug. There are reports even like, they're so sly. They even crush the tablets, put it in ice cubes, and then serve the tourists like warm beer. And then, would you like me to put ice in that? So they're very sly, okay? And you see, like, people resort to these kinds of things to earn money. And then the tourist is knocked out, and they start getting his things. But here's another catch. They get the credit cards, they get the cash, they don't get the laptops, they don't get the phones. In fact, they max out the credit cards while their victim is sleeping. And then once they have the cash, once they get the money from the ATM, they put it all back. They send the sleeping tourist back to the hotel. You know what? When the tourist awakens, it's not even like, his reaction is not even, oh, I've been robbed. No. His first reaction is, oh, I'm so sad. I didn't say goodbye to my new friends. That was how, clever and so sly they were. And you see, like, people resort to this whole modus operandi just to get money. Mm.
And I think there too, there is the political, right? Just like in India, there is a big divide between the haves and the have-nots, as it is in the Philippines. And there are so many people from the Philippines working the world over as house helps, and they're just so not treated too well. And I've seen this across the world. So it does draw back to the to the political at some level, so speaking, tell me, there must have been some books too that have inspired you, that that you've grown up reading, because every good writer also reads a lot. So could we begin with you? Could you talk about some of the books that have inspired you, some of the books that you've grown up reading?
I think there's really one author who has inspired me, and she's Margaret Atwood. And I've read her since I was young. The first book that I read of Margaret Atwood is Cat's Eye. And she has this way of, I think it's a coming of age novel, but I really resonated with the character because, well, Margaret Atwood's style is sort of grim, right? Grim. She's not only Handmaid's Tale, okay? She had other books like Surfacing, Alias Grace. I mean, I read most of them, and the earlier ones. For me, it's really Margaret Atwood because, she was, for the first time, I read an author who really spoke to me about, and who was so honest about pain and about being left out, being not chosen. And I think a lot of my books also want that, like that. Those stories also want to come out. It's cathartic. So,
thank you, Claire. Yeah, Katerina.
Well, as you said, it is impossible to be a writer without reading. So most writers have a long connection since their childhood with reading, and by that, by reading, you create a kind of family, a kind of community around you, and you feel more apart from the benefits that any reader can get from books. I'm not going to talk about this now, because books literally save our lives. And I'm sure that you agree, and mine have been saved by books many times. I think that there is a line of sisters and brothers. I don't want to say mothers and fathers, because there is no hierarchy in this group, no matter how important these writers are. I think that it creates a kind of melting pot where you melt materials and you create your own materials, but which are never new. They are new, but they are old at the same time. And so this is very, very important. And I think that everything I have read has influenced me in a way. I cannot pick one thing. I just can say that there are books that you love and there are books that you need. And when you come across these writers and books that you need, then you are very, very grateful, and they're a great inspiration. But let's not go beyond that.
Lovely. Yeah. What about you, Aneeta?
Trying to come up with one book is impossible.
It doesn't have to be one.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, what are your inspirations?
Yeah, inspirations are, it can be anything. Even now, I like Amar Chitra Katha, Anpai's Amar Chitra Katha. But if there is only one, if I'm dying on a desert island, I would take the Mahabharat. The Mahabharat. Yeah. So that is a book that I have loved all my life. I've read every version, iteration of it, and every time I listen to it, I find something new. It's guided me in my life. I've seen, following it, I see how life repeats. It's a circle that just repeats itself. But if I had to name authors, Louisa May Alcott, Enid Blyton, it just goes on. Hugh Milner with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, Sadhguru, anyone. It's not I don't have a definitive one, but if you ask me and I'm on a desert island and the one book I take, Mahabharat, Rajagopalacharya's Mahabharat.
Okay, that's lovely. So on that note, we have time for one question maybe. Yeah. time for a question? Yeah.
This is addressed to Katerina. You mentioned about the refugee crisis in Greece is an engineered one. How you connect the dots between the 2008 economic recession with that of the refugee crisis? How you connect it? The economic recession in 2008, and the Greek refugee crisis.
He wants to know, there is a refugee crisis in Greece, even in your country. How do you connect the economic recession that happened in 2008 to this crisis?
No, it's not connected. It's not connected. There are two different things. It's just that being a country who is undergoing an economic crisis is even more difficult to deal with a refugee crisis as well. It's even more difficult to provide the right circumstances for receiving these people. But as I said before, this should not be. It should be like a communal decision and care from the whole of the European Union, or it's not a matter of one country, but it is difficult. It has been difficult and bad.
What was your turning point to write some books? You want to think that I want to write books. So what was the incident to make you write books?
Because mine was a very specific point. When I left legal practice, I told my godmother, I'd like to write a book. So she just looked me in the eye and said, don't talk about it, just write the book. So that was the turning point. I had no choice in the matter. Does that answer your question? It was quite brutal, actually.
Yeah.
It wasn't so sweet, she just was quite nasty about it. So I had no choice.
Well, my turning point. Well, I was already surrounded by books, and I was so immersed in many, many stories. And, I wrote my first short story at age 13. And I felt that there were a lot of things happening all around me. So many things happening with my friends, with my parents, friends. And, I was also looking for my identity. I was also attracted to boys. And I just needed to let it all out. And the books were my examples. The books that I had with me. I had Nancy Drew, I had Sweet Valley High, I had all these little romantic books. And they were my example. And I said, it was a need also to record all the happy times, all the touching times, and all the, there is a word in Philippines which is called kilig. Kilig, it's like thrilled or giddiness, a thrilling moment. I wanted to record that as well, which is why, as a teenager, I wrote my first short story. So I think it was reading. That was a turning point.
I can't remember a turning point. I'm just going to say that do it. I think this is the answer to this. That if you have a desire for something or an attraction for something, go for it and do it with different ways. Write a diary or a small poem, but do it almost every day. Do it as much as you can, and that's how you will build an identity. That's how you will discover what interests you, because maybe that's not very clear in the beginning. But once you start doing it, you will start to realize what are the things that attract you most, what are the things that interest you most, because every writer is different. So, yeah.
So, on that note, thank God for turning points, because we have good writers like this amidst us. And I wish you, little one, too, find that turning point very soon. Okay, start writing. All best, and thanks a ton to MBIFL for having us here once again. Thank you.